Hello and welcome to Straight Talk. I'm Melinda Nusofora. It's a relationship fraught with historical disagreements stretching back more than a century. Turkey and Greece, two neighbours whose mutual antagonism has hampered a potentially lucrative partnership. But the past couple of years have seen leaders from both countries set aside that mutual distrust to make way for more practical ties. And that was on full display during Greek Prime Minister Alexis Tspiras' visit to Turkey. His meeting with Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan in Ankara, while cordial, had numerous sticking points looming in the background. One was Turkey's extradition demands on suspected FETÖ members who fled to Greece after the failed 2016 coup.
Our expectation from Greece is not to be a safe haven for members of terrorist organizations like FETÖ, PKK. We expect more cooperation from our neighbor.
For his part, Tsipras stressed the importance of having an open communication channel with Turkey to resolve differences, including disputes in the Aegean Sea. On his second visit to Turkey in 4 years, Tsipras' highly symbolic trips to Istanbul's former cathedral, the Hagia Sofia, and the 19th century Greek seminary raised hopes that ties could improve further. But the Greek leader faces a tough election back home later this year against an opposition wary of his overtures. To examine this relationship a little closer, I'm joined by Emete Gozuguzelli, who is the head of the International Law Department at Akdeniz University, and Byron Matarangas, who is a lecturer at the Bahchesehir University and a former Greek diplomat. Thank you both for being here. Emete, I'm going to start with you first. How do you think the Greek Prime Minister's visit has played out? The Greek opposition says that Tsipras walked into a trap and that the visit doesn't bode well for improved Greek-Turkish relations. How do you read it?
Okay, actually that visit very important and very interesting. When we look at the press conference, we saw that the very optimistic message. And in that case, we can evaluate this meeting and the press conference in two ways. You know that the Greece and Turkey relations based on two approaches, soft security issue and hard security issue. And in this conference, we saw that the soft security issue was in the primary factor for both sides, which they mentioned generally the economic relations, the development of their mutual relationship, and which at the end we saw that they stressed to the world they are keeping to touch on their problems by the way of the diplomatic channels.
Byron, the two countries have just been in a constant state of tension for so many years now. Tsipras knew that this visit was going to reignite debate with Turkey about issues such as the extradition of the FETÖ suspects and Aegean Sea drilling rights. So why do you think he decided to come now and risk a potential backlash back home when he's facing elections this year?
Well, yes, in May there are elections in Greece, together with the elections of the members of the European Parliament. Well, this party, Syriza party, cares, well, any government cares of the relations with Turkey. Relations with Turkey are very important for Greece. Because Turkey is a neighbor, is a big country, much bigger and much powerful than Greece. And relations with Turkey are number one on the agenda of Greek diplomacy. And there should be a mobility in the relations between the two countries. Greece's interest is to avoid any friction, any tension in her bilateral relations with all the neighbor countries. But certainly, you know, a lot of problems have been stocked, indeed, this is the word, have been stocked up, as if they have been stocked in a storage, in the relations between these two countries. Since decades, since many decades, some of the problems, I would say most of these problems should have been solved, and they could have been solved by now. They have not been solved, and they are stocked in a refrigerator. They have been frozen.
One of those issues is the Aegean Sea tensions. And Emete, I want to ask that question to you. Both leaders came out after these meetings and said, yes, we've agreed to decrease tensions in the Aegean Sea, but we haven't seen anything substantial. There was no sort of document that they've signed to outline how this is going to happen. Do you think any progress has been made after this visit?
I agree with you. There is no any agreement, only speech was made, but that was another thing. Tsipras mentioned that respecting to international law in Eastern Mediterranean also he mentioned, but President Erdogan didn't touch the Eastern Mediterranean case, didn't touch the Aegean case, because it is so clear for President Erdogan that is very important topic for Turkey, as an at least it's seen existential threat for its national interest, because Turkey always advocate that solving the issue with negotiation in the context of equity, in the context of equitable solution. So that is very important. Greece side, Tsipras, try to show that Turkey not respecting actually the international law in Eastern Mediterranean. Why he explained this? Because they claim that Turkey made an invasion in Cyprus and they should withdraw their troops. But in fact, it's not reflects the reality. We should check the history. At the end today, we see Turkish some hydrocarbon activity in the Eastern Mediterranean, and in this case, Turkey using its right as an ipso facto ab initio, and Turkey is respecting the international law. If we look at the international law, we can say many things about Eastern Mediterranean, because, you know, the Greek side and the Egypt made draw an exclusive economic zone, then the tension started. Why? Because the Turkish continental shelf, the western part of this area, is falling area beyond. So that's why Turkey put its objections to this delimitation. After that process, the Greek side tried to show itself as a single government in the Cyprus, but really it's not reflects, because, you know, Cyprus issue has been going on since the 1986 and until now, and there is no actually single government. So
we could almost dedicate an entire show to that topic, couldn't we? There's so much to discuss on it, but I'm just going to move on very quickly, Byron, because I want to discuss Tsipras's criticisms back home that he's received about his overtures to Turkey. He hit back at some of his critics while he was in Ankara and said, but it allowed us to consolidate channels of communication on many levels, to overcome obstacles, and to be able today to speak of a positive agenda. He's visited Turkey twice, he's met Erdogan on the sidelines of global summits, and he was the first one to call Erdogan after the failed coup attempt. He's obviously building a strong personal relationship with Erdogan. He's communicating regularly. Do you think that this is his key to resolving these past disputes?
Well, personal relations between rulers, prime ministers, head of state is very important. Mr. Tsipras obviously tries to have a good contact with Mr. Erdogan, since there is no prime minister in Turkey. He tries to have a good contact with Mr. Erdogan. And Mr. Erdogan is very open. And Mr. Erdogan tried to have a good contact with with the predecessor of Mr. Tsipras, also with Samaras, with Antonis Samaras. And I have to point it out, it is true that since this ruling party, AKP, Erdogan, with Prime Minister Mr. Erdogan, came to power in Turkey, they ameliorated substantially the bilateral relations with Greece. I have to point it out. This is a reality, and another reality I have to point out, because I am a Greek from Istanbul and I'm a Turkish citizen. Also, this government ameliorated the position of the non-Muslim minorities in Turkey. Yes, there are problems which should be solved. Yes, there are problems which are still unsolved. Yes, but the whole ambience changed. Changed in favor, for the good of the non-Muslim minorities in Turkey, who, all of them are Turkish citizens. And this government, and personally Mr. Erdogan, has put his personal seal on the improvement policy of the relations with Greece.
It's going to be interesting then to see how he deals with the future leader of Greece once we know who that is after the elections. It will be very interesting to see how this relationship plays out. Thank you both very much for joining us on Straight Talk.
Thank you very much.